Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Rasnick.
Here.
Mr. Sharp.
Here.
Thank you. Got a vote.
So moved. Second.
Yes, ma'am. Tim Rund writes the school board concerning the student parking policy at George Mason High School, and specifically vis-a-vis the potential for a fee for minimal student use rather than regular student use.
Yes, and I did email the family back that same morning, and Sevi Padilla and also Mr. Bird started working on a plan to address those students who would need very minimal parking at GM. It's just going to take probably another week or so to get everything pulled together.
Okay, I move that the school board approve for submission to the city manager the proposed 2013-2014 operating fund budget in the amount of $40,937,800, which requires a city appropriation of $33,682,700.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to propose that we amend the motion. I would like to substitute that proposed amount with the superintendent's recommended budget of $41,288,900, and also propose to include $3,348,300 in the form of a contingency fund to carry forward her unfunded identified needs.
Second.
Madam Chair? Okay. So let me talk a little bit about why I feel strongly about amending this the proposed budget. When we started this budget cycle, we asked that the superintendent bring forward what she felt like she needed to fund the schools. In the past 2 budget cycles, we have worked very hard with City Council to meet their proposed guidance. We were obviously in a really difficult budget situation. What we found out last year is that that situation wasn't quite as difficult as we first thought. But as a result, and I think you'll see as we discuss the budget tonight, we've been in a flat budget cycle with exploding enrollment. There does not seem to be any end in sight regarding that uptick in enrollment. So the superintendent came forward with a recommended budget. That recommended budget includes a total operating budget that I've asked for in this amendment of $41,288,900. Included in that budget, she has separated items that she has listed as mandated, critical, and important. She's also separated another budget item line that she's identified as unfunded but needs. Okay? So I go back to our initial characterization of what we wanted from this budget, which was tell us what you need. I don't see a lot of difference between any of those 4 categories. They're all needs. Obviously, the mandated needs are things that she has identified that we really don't have much control over at all. They're things that are mandated either by federal or state law or contractual obligations, things of that nature. I do want to point out just a couple of things. That adoption of the initial proposed budget will exclude the items that she has identified as important. And those items are, for the most part, instructional staff. Staff that she has identified as being important to handle these upticks in enrollment. Now, it's not a large number. It's $351,000, but we heard from the majority of our present and some of our former PTA members tonight that they felt like we should include those numbers. The superintendent felt like we should include them. I darn sure feel like we should include them. So I don't want to read through the list of every one of them, but if you take the time to look at them, you'll see they are, as she identified, important budget items. Secondly, the $3.3 million that I've asked to also be included in unfunded identified needs. In our last budget cycle, for the first time, and this is really through the leadership of our chair, we included unfunded needs in our budget. We presented that to City Council. It became an important part of the conversation this summer when we asked Council to fund some of those unfunded needs on a, we'll call it an exigent basis towards technology. I'm sad to say it became a bit of a protracted argument over how and when and why we should fund it, but eventually we did get the funding. I'll say mainly because of community support. I don't know if we would have had the same leg to stand on had we not identified those needs, albeit unfunded, in that budget. I think it's important we identify them here and now while we're discussing this. I would hope at the very least if the board doesn't support these unfunded needs in the budget itself, because I still say they're needs, that we will at least include it as unfunded in our total budget presentation to the council later. But I just want to talk about a few of these things. There are many pages that the superintendent listed in unfunded needs, but some of them in particular, these are not things, we're not talking about sushi boats and dancing bears here. We're talking about things like special education training, assistive technology, an ESOL teacher, health services part-time staff, ink for printers, textbook replacements, calculators for algebra and geometry, a math specialist teacher, snow removal equipment. I have a feeling that's something that will probably be important come tomorrow, and you'll probably want future budgets. Cameras for the interior and exterior at GM, at Mount Daniel, at Mary Ellen Henderson. cameras for buses, and including the 403B match that I think we might talk about a little later. Also included in that is a 2% increase on the scale. One of the things we talked about last year was really trying to close the gap, especially with Arlington. I believe this community will support having the highest paid teachers in the region, and I think we should. We should push for that, especially if we're going to be asking our teachers to teach to larger and larger classrooms, we should compensate them for it. So I think it's important that we at least consider adding this, and I think that adding it in the form of a contingency fund makes sense, and let me tell you why. The superintendent has told us that it has become difficult because of our funding time frame. And as we've seen growth, things change. Priorities change in how she has to fund things. And giving her the ability to fund against these important needs for requirements, but the flexibility to spend, when it's necessary, I think gives her the tools she needs. I'll mention that the percentage that we create there in terms of a contingency fund will be less than 10%, probably nearly half of what council has deemed to be a responsible contingency fund. So I think that given that we really are approaching almost 50% of the budget now for the city, a little less than I think Fairfax is, by the way, having a contingency fund like that is probably a responsible thing to do. This board has shown a sustained pattern of fiscal responsibility. When the council was in need for funds, we gave back. We didn't really even complain about it. We realized it was important for the community, and we took our licks, and we tightened up our bootstraps, and a lot of that fell in the backs of our staff and our teachers, and they got us through it. And in times of the flat budgets in the last 2 years, we showed extraordinary fiscal responsibility through the great management by our staff, our superintendents. I don't think anyone can really with a straight face say we haven't managed this well. And so the idea of giving the school superintendent and her staff a decent contingency fund when we know we're facing absolutely difficult enrollment forecast to manage is a reasonable thing to do. If we shortchange this budget going forward, it is just going to kick the can. It's going to make it that much harder next year and the next year and the next year. So while I have a lot of sympathy for the idea that we want to slowly increase, we're losing the race against enrollment. We're losing the race against keeping class sizes small and keeping good teachers. I believe this community will support it. I think if we don't give them the choice, we won't know. One of the things that I have heard through our budgeting discussions has been that we need to be cognizant of what the community can afford. I have to tell you, we still don't know what that is. All of the evidence in this regard has been anecdotal at best. The only data-driven evidence I've seen is the continued evidence that we're one of the wealthiest communities in America. As a matter of fact, #1, 2 years running in terms of per capita income. So this idea that there's no tax elasticity, I don't know what that is built on other than just anecdotal evidence. But the interesting thing is it's not our job. Our job is to give a budget to the city council that we feel like we need to fund our schools. Okay? It's their job to see if they can fund it. And I understand that it's a difficult thing because we've been flat. But as some members of council, especially Councilman Sharp, have identified, it doesn't have to be, this doesn't have to correlate directly with an increase in taxes. Okay? There are lots of different ways that this can be funded. We know that we have had expanding fund reserves on the city side. And so for the same reason that some may view this increase as too much too fast, you know what, we may be saving money too fast. And so that delta that's being created is one that both sides may need to come together on in order to manage this problem going forward. So while I know that we as a board are looking at a proposed budget that we think will be the best that council can deal with, I am telling you now, they still are going to look at the budget you're deciding or you think you can propose and say it's too much. They're going to say it's too much. The funny thing is, it's not enough. We're not even funding what the superintendent told us she needs. So I would ask your support. I think this is I think the superintendent put together a reasonable request. I'm not going to bore you with the data because I know we're going to talk about that in the budget, whether you pass my amendment or not. But I think there's great evidence why her request is reasonable. I think there is good reason for why we should have a contingency fee in that amount, and I'd ask for your support in the amendment. And now I'll answer any questions anybody has.
Thank you, Mr. Rasnick. Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Sharp?
I'd like to say a couple of things in support. I have here a bit of history from our earlier consideration of a budget. It comes from fiscal year '07. And some may remember that this was a period of time, roughly a 5-year period, in connection with our building of a middle school where the council and the board essentially had agreed on a kind of revenue sharing thing called the diet. So the board was constrained to follow certain formulae in constructing a budget where we had to stay within numbers that allowed us to add more staff if we had more student enrollment. It allowed us to increase pay if there was an increase in the consumer price index. There were a couple of other components in the formula, but those were the two big items. So the theme of presenting this budget in '07 was taking care of needs while being mindful of the diet. And the anticipated increase in enrollment at that time was just 1.2%, 22 students. The increase for next year is, for us, 124 students, roughly 10 times that number, or close to 10 times. Anyway, the teachers were receiving both a step increase and a 4.1% COLA. This year, there would be a step increase proposed and also a 1% above the step, but the 1% really would, in most instances, be consumed by the required payment that the teachers would need to be making, that is the gradual increase in their contributions to the VRS, the retirement system. So two very, very different scenarios. I think you'll see where in '07, obviously a very different time when employment was very high, unemployment very low. The CPI was increasing rather rapidly. Today, only around 2%, whereas they're over 4%. So again, a very, very different time, and a very different proposal was put forward. But it does indicate, I think, the commitment that this board has had all along to try to measure its request, both in terms of needs of our educational program, but also in terms of the capacity of the community to pay. And it's always sort of a ballpark measure in both instances, I think. but it's the stuff of which it's the reason why you have an elected council and an elected board. The citizens get the chance to assess whether the judgments that we've made on these calls are the right judgments or they're the wrong judgments. And if we're wrong, they throw us out. I hope, frankly, that my judgment, which I'm going to exercise a little bit later in a yes vote, I anticipate anyway, I hope that judgment is wrong, frankly. I was sort of right last year, but last year doesn't mean a whole lot looking forward. The points that Mr. Rasnick made, I think, were very, very sound about what kind of quality education we'd like to deliver, and also about the overall capacity of the city, at least its families, its household income. I think we're very, very strong in capacity to pay there, perhaps stronger than any other community in the U.S. We do have some shortfalls in our capacity, and they're frankly in our commercial sector, in our overall. There are other taxes that we try to collect, sales taxes, meals taxes, and B-poll taxes. I'll just say that I think our way that we approach those isn't ideal, and but in an overall sense, those things do constrain what otherwise would be at the top of the scale in terms of ability of a community to pay. I think they hold us back from being at the very top. So I will support a somewhat lesser, actually a lot lesser proposal, because it's only going to be about half the request in terms of increased request from the council. But really, we do have all of the needs that the superintendent has pointed out. She's gone through a painstaking review of all of the class size, all of the materials, all of the technology, just a very, very fine, detailed review, and I think a very, very skillful review of what it would take to really, really provide a top-notch educational program. And I thank her very, very much for doing that, even though at the end of the day, she also came out with the conclusion that if you stack it all up, we probably can't ask for more than $6 million increase this year. We've got to hold it to somewhere roughly half of that. And I also congratulate her on that assessment. I think it would be extremely difficult for us as board members to try to fashion something that would make sense from an elected official standpoint if the superintendent was pushing for a $6 million increase this year. So again, Mr. Rasnick, thank you, and Superintendent Jones, thank you very, very much. I won't be supporting this motion, but I do want to express my deep thanks to both of them for highlighting the kind of program that this community should be pursuing as a leader in education. And I think we will make some long strides toward getting there. We have lots more work to do with our program, and also with building a community that does have the capacity to pay all of these needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Are there other questions or comments? Yes.
First of all, I would echo Mr. Sharp's sentiments about the work of the superintendent, and I think Mr. Rasnick has brought up fundamentally, over the next couple of years, we're going to be confronting what we as Falls Church value most, and what's core to what we are as a city. And I just thought I would answer a couple of the questions Mr. Rasnick raised about where Falls Church stands relative to neighboring jurisdictions. Fairfax County, these are from the Census Bureau's website. Median household income, $108,000. Arlington, $99,000. Alexandria, $82,000. Manassas Park, $70,000. City of Falls Church, $120,000. Poverty rates: Fairfax County, 5.5%. Arlington, 7.1%. Alexandria City, 7.8%. Manassas Park, 4.3%. Falls Church, 3.9%. I think the other thing that I would note is that the per capita incidence of people with bachelor's degree or higher in Falls Church, I think, is the highest of any jurisdiction in the United States, and I think that speaks to the value that we place on education at all levels. But you can't get to the higher levels without starting somewhere in K through 12. So I think those are very telling figures. I don't think that the city is a giant piggy bank to be raided, and I think we've worked hard to come up with a realistic conception of what we can do this year. So I won't be supporting Mr. Rasnick's motion either, but he speaks a larger truth, and a truth that we will be confronting next year and the years out. There are enrollment pressures. Enrollment pressures drive staff. Staff is 85% of our costs, so it is a fairly rigid input and output system. There's no slack anymore in the system, and I think we need to confront these things. I'm an avid cyclist, and they say that with bike components, you can get components that are light, cheap, and durable, and you get to choose 2 out of the 3. This year, we have tax rates, city services, and the schools. I would argue you get to choose 2 out of the 3, but you can't have all 3. And what we'll be confronting is what that mix looks like. I think we've been undercapitalized as a city at all levels, but most of all as a school system. It should be no secret that the high school is 60 years old because it was built 60 years ago, and you can do the math. There are enrollment pressures, and so all of this comes down to, Mr. Rasnick has laid out where we're headed, and I commend him for it. I hope people will take some of these numbers that I've thrown out and look at them in more detail, but I think we can do more, and we will have to do more if we are to maintain who we are as well as our independence as a city.
All right, thank you for that. Anyone else? All right, if there are no more comments or questions, I will call the vote. What we're voting on is the amendment to the original motion Mr. Rasnick put forward. And let's do some roll call votes tonight, Mr. Kimball, just to keep things straight. So
Yes,
if you would
ma'am.
please call the roll.
Mr. Castillo.
No.
Mr. Cheney.
No.
Ms. Highland.
No.
Ms. Carney.
No.
Mr. Lawrence.
No.
Mr. Rasnick.
Yes.
Mr. Sharp.
No.
The motion fails. The amendment fails.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kimball. So, flipping my paper back over again, what we have on the table now is a motion. Are there any questions or discussion on the motion before us that's been made and seconded? Mr. Cheney.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put my 2 cents in. I'm not nearly as eloquent as Greg, and sitting next to him is scary. I will probably not support this motion. It is a lot. It is, and let me start with, I do understand the word needs, and I certainly understand that all the things on the list could be justified as needs. I also looked at the balance of the impact, and I would, and we have scenarios here, but I would look at a lower scenario in my judgment. Scenario I would look at is still something that would increase the transfer and the budget. In fact, by the numbers we have, the budget would still go up by about 6.1%, the transfer by about 9.8%. And let me make it clear that in that increase, you would still get all of the mandated items that were referred to, all the legally mandated items. You would clearly get the staff step increase, which I think is absolutely fundamental, and I don't think there's any disagreement on the board about that. And you'd essentially, in the course of doing that, added still about 14 and a half positions. So we would continue to take key steps toward smaller class sizes. And in fact, it's about 2/3 of the overall requested positions in all of the scenarios that we've talked about tonight. So it's a pretty major step. It is clearly not all of the step that is on the table in the motion. It doesn't do it as fast. I am concerned about the speed with which those impacts are felt. I certainly understand the enrollment pressures. But I think my take is that I would like it to be smaller. It's about $1 million smaller than if I were voting on it, an amendment. And I won't go through the amendment process because I think I know where that will come out. So as a result, I will probably not support it, but I want to make it clear it's not that some of the key elements that we still would get in what I would support are still there. Clearly the staff increase, clearly a lot of steps toward smaller class sizes. What it would do is more incrementally move toward what I think is a balance between a couple of Mr. Castillo's pillars, if you will, and namely the tax rate and the school needs. And I don't have a say in the city needs, but the tax rate and the school needs. So that's my position. I think I've talked about that in work session. There's no surprises there. It would still be an increase of about, as I said, 6.1% where I would come out versus whatever the number is going to be on this motion. So it's a substantial increase, just not as substantial. So.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cheney. Mr. Rasner?
So I guess if at first you don't succeed, try again. So, Madam Chair, I'd like to make an amendment to include in the existing budget request an amendment to include the superintendent's important budget items totaling $351,100. I'd like those items to once again be included in the form of additional contingency fee funds for the same reason I stated before. I know it might not be palatable for the board to add $3.6 million, but I would at least like to think that we could support as a baseline her recommended budget. I'm not, again, going to go through each of the items, but because I know we've all looked at them in budget sessions. But these are, as she has styled them, important budget items. And for the most part, again, the lion's share of that $351,000 is instructional staff. So I'd like to amend the existing budget request to include those items.
Thank you. There's a motion on the table. Is there a second for Mr. Rasnick's motion?
Second.
Mr. Lawrence has seconded that motion. So what we're going to do now is we're going to see if there are questions or comments about the motion that Mr. Rasnick has made, and then after we go through that part, we will take a vote as to whether we adopt that motion before we go back to our original one. All right. So questions or comments down on to my right? Anyone? Mr. Lawrence.
This will be quick. I hated not being able to support Greg's last motion for two reasons. One, he's a very good friend. And secondly, every single thing he said was true. And we all know it. And I still couldn't vote for it because it would have been just so unrealistic in this budget environment. What he's suggesting is scenario one for anybody who goes through the paper we go through. And it really is the superintendent's budget, and I have no doubt as to where this vote's going to come out any more than Greg did before, because we've had our work session, we've had enough public meetings, but yeah, I can't not support doing what the superintendent asked for, especially in light of the fact that there are $3.4 million in unfunded needs, even in her request. And I can't say thank you enough to Tony. I mean, this is my first, 6 months, and not only have you done an amazing amount of work, you're also available almost 24/7, mornings, evenings, at basketball games, on the weekends, and I've certainly abused that with questions to a ridiculous degree. So thank you on a personal basis and a school board member basis. But I will be supporting this because honestly, this is what the superintendent says we need.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Are there other questions or comments on this particular motion on this end of the dais? Don't see any. Any down here, Mr. Cheney and Mr. Resnick, Ms. Hyland? All right, hearing none, then we'll call for the vote. Just to remind the audience who's following along at home, this is a vote on the amendment Mr. Resnick has proposed to the original one that Ms. Hyland proposed, which would add the important items and about $351,000 as a contingency fee to the budget. So, all in favor of that, please say aye.
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes, sir.
could I ask that you call the roll?
Oh, yes, thank you. We can call the roll. Mr. Kimball?
Yes. Mr. Castillo?
No.
Mr. Cheney?
No.
Ms. Highland?
No.
Ms. Carney?
No.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Mr. Rasnick?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
No.
The motion fails.
All right, thank you very much. So, we are back now to the original motion that was made. And back to the question of, is there any questions, comment, or discussion? Do we need to read the original motion back so that people know what it is, or does everybody kind of have it in their head? Yes, Mr. Lawrence.
Not to the reading back, but just
To make a
quick
comment.
comment. I am going to vote for this because, you know, we do need to send what I think is both a bit of a stretch number, but also a reasonable one. I have no illusions as to whether or not we're going to get the whole thing from the council. I don't think we will. I'll be very surprised if we do, but I would ask that whoever's watching and anybody after, and this will be on board docs fairly soon, I assume. This is something from our work session today that shows the relationship between city revenue, enrollment, and the school transfer. And what it basically shows is from FY 11, 12, and 13, there's been a gap between the city transfer and city revenue of almost 10 million. I mean, we have been underfunding for years. This is not going to make it up by any means. Looking at enrollment, I mean, everyone kept talking about stairs and steps. I mean, we're walking up steps, and the biggest problem is we've got somebody who's building steps faster than we can walk up them, and we've got to figure out when we're going to start running or jumping, and this doesn't go too far too fast. I'm just hoping that it's, you know, it's enough to get us started, because what I heard here tonight, which really scared me, was just dealing with enrollment puts, in my mind, the high school at risk, because those numbers are going to be so tough to deal with that anything bigger is, you know, going to get pushed out at best. So I will vote for this, and I wish realistically we could get more because we need it.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Sharp, do you have any further comments?
Yes, thank you. And I also will commend our chair for providing the chart that Mr. Lawrence noted that does show that over a 3-year period, nearly 10 million of what you might say is underfunding according to a relatively reasonable revenue sharing arrangement might have yielded. Now, there were some really extraordinary circumstances during the last 5 years of the recessionary period, and the city ran into some additional problems beyond just the national recession. I think it's about to come out of those problems and to right many of the issues that had been driving this gap in funding. I would hope that the city could realize that this very traumatic period that it went through, the targets that they've set for getting to an advanced reserve and getting there in the time frame that they've done so was too far, too fast. I certainly understand why this path that they've chosen was taken. As I say, it was a very traumatic experience that the city went through, and I think it's only understandable that there would be somewhat of an overreaction to the trauma. But I hope they will realize that it was an overreaction, and that they will look to the future with some different lenses than they've had so far. I hope they will decide that, as an old friend, Gary Knight, once did when he was on the city council, that the school request was too low, and voted on the night that the council adopted the budget to add money, at that time, a rather significant amount. It was only $100,000 at that time, but today it might be somewhere closer to $1 million, considering the gap in time between his last gesture in that way and where we are today. But also, I'll just say, I think the big reason why there are still issues preventing us from asking for more than is in the current motion have to do with the assessments that have been delivered, not just by our assessor, but also by Arlington and Fairfax, and that those have been very consistent in their review of the different categories of real property, and at least for the moment, for this coming year, they put a real break on what I think is what we otherwise might ask for. And I'm hopeful that there will be a correction in that viewpoint as well, that there are better days ahead for both commercial property and residential property in our entire region, but they just haven't surfaced at this moment. So it'll be hard to justify more than what the motion's request is putting out there tonight. Thanks very much for getting us to this point, and I look forward to further review of how we deal with the number that we are requesting for the council. I asked for the community's support in our request, and I think there'll be some additional look by the school board at how we can make sure that as we get closer to our opening next year with a new school and new numbers of students, that we make sure that we prioritize small class size, and we may need to make some adjustments in the underlying elements that we've so far built in this budget figure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Mr. Castillo, any comments you'd like to make?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I would like to thank everybody on this board and staff for what's been a difficult process, but I think a highly collegial and successful one. I would start out by echoing what Mr. Sharp said. I think sometimes people think there's more of a science to this process, and I think it is largely an art based on the little I've seen, and that there will be corrections, and this is a dynamic process. I hope that this budget succeeds, and I hope that we have a robust debate in the community about this budget going forward, so that we can really get a sense of where the community stands with respect to its relationship with the schools. I would note that yesterday, Arlington came out with its proposed budget. There's always discussion about what are the neighbors up to, and I think there's some instructive information in that proposed budget. There's some PowerPoints on the Arlington County School website. The first thing I would note is, if you have curiosity about enrollment trends, you'll see that Arlington has been hit by the same enrollment growth, double-digit growth percentage enrollment rises as have we. People talk about, is there a difference between the quality of Falls Church students and the school system versus elsewhere? Arlington noted that its dropout rate fell from 12.5% in 2008 to 7.7% in 2012. The superintendent tells me that we probably don't get north of 1%. It's a fraction of a percent. And I think that's utterly extraordinary. At the same time, Arlington is proposing to spend $18,709 per pupil this year, more than we are proposing, quite substantially. And so to those who say you can't throw money at a problem, I would agree. But I would also say you can't expect miracles and, squeeze blood from a stone. I think we've budgeted responsibly and prudently. But at the same time, when your enrollment goes up by 25% over the past couple of years, you're going to experience pressures. I think we've tried to stave off the reckoning, but the reckoning is here. There's no slack in the system. Is this everything that we would want? No. But given that gaps will continue to widen, this is prudent simply to avoid, I know council doesn't like to say kicking the can down the road. We seem to be pretty free with that term, but it is basically, taking a loan against the future, and that's not prudent. And finally, I would reiterate, we need to devote more resources on a going forward basis to our city as a whole, and I support this as a step forward, but it's only the beginning of what will be a much bigger journey.
All right, thanks very much. Mr. Cheney, do you have anything you wanted to say? Mr. Rasnick, anything you'd like to say at this point? Yeah, Craig's good.
So, austerity. For some time, we've been addressing budgets both for the city and the schools with that sort of simple new buzzword in mind. And I believe that we're at a crossroads as a community, and we have to decide what the role of government's going to be in the city. Is it going to be a vehicle for investment, for building, for progress, or is it some Leviathan, to be, as one council member suggested last year, that needs to be shackled? The greatest strides that we've made as a people have been engineered by government investment. We wouldn't have built interstate highways. We wouldn't have brought power to the masses. We wouldn't have compulsory education for all children. We wouldn't have left our footprints on the moon without government investment. And so we've come to this crossroads as a community. We see it in the way votes are happening, and we have to decide. We really need the community to help decide what our forward path is. Are we going to continue to adopt an approach of austerity first, an approach that seems to have failed across Europe, an approach that has our country seemingly paralyzed, people frustrated? Or are we going to adopt an approach that's a little more progressive, the root word of which is progress? Progress requires investment. So if we want to have a government here in the city that continues to progress, it's going to require investment. So I would urge this board to consider that as we go forward. I will not be supporting this budget because I do not think it does enough to meet the needs and requirements of the city. I simply cannot vote for any budget that is at the very least not what the superintendent has requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rasnick. Ms. Hyland.
I agree with much of what Mr. Rasnick says. He's expressed it very eloquently, and there's a lot to be said for what progress we could all benefit from in our city. I also believe, though, that the budget proposal that we have in front of us right now meets two important needs that I think many of us identified as drivers to what we were looking for in the budget this year. Me, other school board members, staff, folks who've come and spoken to us in the community, a step increase for, fair compensation for our staff, which we identified by a step increase, and adding classroom teachers as needed to meet the demands and keep class sizes reasonable. And because of that, I believe that this is, this does meet our needs. I do say that with trepidation, though, because I believe that we will have a difficult fight ahead of us, and I know that we're going to need a lot of community support, and I don't know that we'll get this amount, but I am supportive of it because I feel like it's something that, our superintendent, in all the hard work that she has done to put for this forward, has identified as it's workable and it does meet the needs that we have, but it's not perfect, and I know that, but I still hope that we can get the support out there that we need and can, pass this, and hopefully the city will see fit to do so as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Highland. I'm going to make just a few comments, and then we will vote on this one, unless in the interim we have another motion. I just want to say a couple things. First, I want to remind the community that the school board has been at this since mid-January timeframe. During that time, we've evaluated countless scenarios. We've looked at numbers of all sorts and varieties. You can see, I don't know if she isn't here, but Dr. Jones has a notebook this thick of things she's provided to us over that time. We've had 3 hearings from the community. We've had 3 work sessions, 4 if you include the one this evening before this vote. Members of the school board have gone out into the community talking to parents. We've been in every school in central office listening to staff. And I want to remind the community of that because I don't want anyone to have the impression that what we're going to vote on tonight is done lightly. A lot of time and effort and work has been put into this. The second thing I want to say is that I am going to support this, but it's interesting to me listening to the comments on the dais this evening. This is my 7th budget, and usually by the time we get to a budget vote, people are satisfied, positive, and content with what's before them. And I would say we don't have that feeling this year. This has been very, very hard for the school board to reach consensus on what to do, because I think that no one on this dais who's going to vote thinks that what we're going to vote for is enough, because it's just not. But I do think the majority of us think it's the responsible and right thing to do to take some major steps this year to get us into the future. And so if you're listening to people talk and they're not saying this is the greatest budget ever, I think that's why. I think that's why. And I think in a city like this, it's really almost a shame that it's that way. At the beginning of this process, we did ask the superintendent very clearly to outline her needs for us. And from my perspective, we did that for a few reasons. 1, because we honestly wanted to know. But 2, after many years, at least all the years that I've been on the board before this, of the superintendent being given all kinds of guidance by us about what she could ask for, I thought it was very important for the community to understand clearly what the needs are of our school division. Not what we could fit into, a certain percentage or anything like that, but what our superintendent felt we needed. And I congratulate her for bringing that to us. I think it took a lot of hard work. I think it took courage, because it was a big number, and she's a pretty new superintendent in this town. So I want to recognize that. And I think that what she brought to us is a fair articulation of our needs. And in fact, I might look at that list and see that there's some things on there that I might want to put on. But she brought those needs to us. Now, I want to clarify that what I did not mean, when, at least from my perspective when we asked that, was that what she brought would be funded in total, right? Because we have to look at a lot of things, not the least of which is the resources that we have. So just want to give people that perspective, right? But we've looked at this. We've gone down pages and pages, and what we've come up with is what we've come up with. Now, I think that one of the things that people in the community might look at and think is a lot is the number of staff that are implied in this budget. And they would be right. They would be right. But I would like to remind people that for a number of years now, we've had student growth and more student growth and more student growth, 25+% since 2007, and we've not added a lot of staff. And you can only go so long in that fashion before you have to. So I look at this budget as we're at a tipping point. We've skinnied things down and skinnied things down. We've jammed our poor children into a desk in the corner and classes into, you know, what used to be closets, and done all of that, and we just can't anymore. So this is why you're going to see a lot of staff. As I've been in the community talking to people, as I've been in the schools and central office talking to staff, the one thing they've all said is, please reduce our class sizes, and that's what this staff is intended to do. It's also intended to help us with the increase in our special needs population. And I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but we do have an increasing number of children who can only excel in our system with some special assistance, and legally and morally we must give it to them. And so this budget includes a lot of that kind of staffing to support them, and we must do it. This budget also includes compensation for our existing staff who, God love them, have stayed with us over the past several years and excelled. Every school I went into to meet with staff, the staff said, we have needs. We have needs for technology or for support or for smaller classrooms, or they all had things they needed, but there was not a school I was in, and I was in every one of them, every single one of them, where the staff didn't at the end say, we thank you for your support, we'll make it work. And that's the attitude our staff has, and that's what we need to keep. And so this compensation is meant to tell them, it's a signal to our staff that we value them, that we've listened and we think they're important. So that must be in this budget. The other things that are in this budget, you know, are some safety items. We took some steps to change the way we secure our school properties after things that happened last December. They've been very successful, and we intend to continue them. The students have been very pleased, the staff is pleased, the parents are pleased. It's working out fabulously, and everybody feels safe. And then the last thing is transition is another theme here in this budget. For those who don't remember, next September we'll be moving 8th grade to the middle school and we'll be moving 5th grade back to the elementary school. And so as we open the new TJ wing and we move kids, you know, among places, there's a lot of expense that has to do with transition. And we need to fund that stuff. So while I would have loved to vote for something that was frankly much higher than this, and I could certainly rationalize something much higher than this, I'm going to vote for the motion we have before us because I think it's the best balance of meeting our needs and responsibility. I think those were the terms that Kieran used a little bit earlier this evening. For folks in the community, I think that they may look at this and there may be some kind of quick reactions to say that this is going to cause a huge tax increase. I don't believe it should. I think that there are resources within the community to abate that necessity. I think we have revenue surplus coming up this year. I think we have a lot of money in the city's planned budget to go into our savings accounts, which are already at policy and could be deferred in the short term, not just for school, but for school and city operations. And so I think that there are ways to fund this that aren't just a tax increase. And I would encourage people in the city who feel like that's not true to dial my phone or send a note to my email and let me meet with you and let's talk about those things. I'd encourage everyone in the city to be open-minded until they understand the details of this budget about what it does for the city and our students. I wanted to let people know that the superintendent has arranged for a couple of opportunities very close in for the community to hear more about this budget and ask their questions. The first will be on the 18th of March. Mary Ellen Henderson?
Yes.
At Mary Ellen Henderson. So just stay tuned for information about the time for that. And the school board members who can be there will be there. We'll be talking about this budget and why we did what we did and what we think it means and answering all the questions we need to answer. So please put that on your calendar. Also,
And that's joint PTA.
joint PTA.
Yes.
Sponsored by the PTAs. Thank you. On the 20th of the month, the League of Women Voters is sponsoring a community forum. And that community forum is about
School budget and enrollment.
School budget and enrollment. And that's another opportunity for people in the community to learn more and ask the tough questions about this particular budget. This budget will be taken to the city manager and dropped into his budget that will be presented to council next week at this time, on the 11th. So people have an opportunity to see something about the budget then as well. So, and then there are the town hall meetings that will come, later on. So we've tried to orchestrate a number of opportunities for the community to learn about this particular budget. And I think that's all I want to say. I'm proud of this school board. I'm proud of our staff, both Hunter and Tony and their efforts, and also the staff in our schools. I think this is a budget that the city can afford. I think it's responsible. I think we can live with it. It takes a step forward, and I wish I could see a way to do more. Any further comments? Yes, Mr. Sharp.
I want to thank the chair again for leading us to a process, I think, very efficiently. Frankly, this was a much easier time tonight than I thought it would be from an efficiency standpoint. And I'll also say I think she's been very, very open to members of the board and helped new members of the board, which we have had several during her term of office, some by election, some by appointment. And so we've had to deal with those bumps in the road too. And I would just also say that our student member helped us greatly, I think, during our earlier work sessions to understand the sort of where things are on the real landscape of how students and staff are relating to each other, with the difficulties that they're experiencing with the larger class sizes and the different programs and technologies that they're having to adapt to. And those were very, very vital perspectives to provide for us. And I know they've been built into the number that we've adopted this evening. So thank you both. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. I appreciate those comments. Mr. Kimball, I think it's time to call for the vote.
Madam Chair.
Oh, it's not quite time to call for the vote. Yes, Mr. Rasnick.
Get off that easy, did you? So I don't want to pile on the thanks too much because everybody else has, but I do recognize, having sat in Charlotte's seat last year for this, that the amount of work that goes in serving as chair and vice chair in the budget season, it's sort of like herding cats in a hurricane, trying to get to some level of consensus. It's difficult. And I want to thank you and my fellow board members for allowing me to entertain my amendments and to discuss them, because it's important. I also want to make it very clear that I think every member of this board is operating absolutely with the best interest of the schools and our children in mind. And I don't want anyone to walk away with the idea that I don't think that you're not supporting those in any way denigrates your support for the schools and anyone else, and I appreciate that. Just a difference of opinion, that's all. So again, Madam Chair and Vice Chair and Dr. Jones, thank you so much for your leadership and hard work during this process. I know it's incredibly time-consuming, and I just appreciate it.
And we're only halfway through.
Yep.
All right, now, Mr. Kimball, can we please call the roll?
Pleasure, Madam Chairman. Mr. Castillo?
Aye.
Mr. Cheney?
No.
Ms. Highland?
Yes.
Ms. Carney?
Yes?
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Mr. Rasnick?
No.
And Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball, and thank you, colleagues, for that. All right, moving on to what's going to seem simple by now. The next is approval of the submission to the city manager of the fiscal year 14 food service budget. Is there a motion?
Madam Chairman, I move that the school board approve for submission to the city manager the proposed 2013-2014 food service budget with receipts and disbursements in the amount of $937,600.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion, or are there any questions or comments?
Would there be any interest in adding a $351,000 contingency?
thought you were going to say 3.4 million. Other than that, are there any other questions or comments on this? Yeah, all right. Hearing none, we'll call for the vote.
Very good. Mr. Castillo? Aye. Mr. Cheney? Yes. Ms. Highland? Yes. Ms. Carney?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence? Yes. Mr. Rasnick?
Yes.
And Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Thank you. It carries.
Thank you very much. The next item is approval of submission to the city manager of the fiscal year 14 community services budget. Is there a motion there?
I move that the school board approve for submission to the city manager the proposed 2013-2014 Community Services Fund in the amount of $1,809,300, requiring a total city appropriation of $92,900.
Thank you. Is there a second to that, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Are there any questions, comments, or conversation on this item?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Rasnick.
Could I just ask briefly for the superintendent or for Hunter to describe, what's the nature of the other revenue? Again, I apologize, I get a little confused about which part the other revenue.
It is predominantly daycare fees. It's also rent that is paid for facility use. Yeah.
I just have a question. Obviously, this is a much smaller amount, if I'm reading the numbers right, than in the past. So I'm assuming that when this goes over, there'll be an accompanying explanation of what changes we recommend in the accounting that make this possible.
There will be a formal communication as well, and actually, Mr. LeCondre just received that information tonight too. So.
Okay, do you want to summarize that for the community in case they're watching?
Yes. Currently, in the community service funds, there are a number of activities in the community service fund. The single largest is our daycare program. There's also facilities rentals. There is the BIE community outreach function. There is the FCC TV function. There is a small community education function. There is the activities related to the Falls Church Education Foundation. And there is also a separate cost center for our Recs and Parks Department's use of our school facilities on evenings, on weekends, and during the summer. The changes, the significant changes that the board is referring to tonight would, first of all, it would transfer the management and the oversight of the Falls Church cable television, FCC TV, to the general government, out from under the auspices of the school board and over to the general government. And second of all, there would be a change in the manner which payment would be received to cover the direct costs related to the Department of Rec and Parks use of our facilities on the evenings, on weekends, and over the summer. Currently, this year and in years previous, the school board has simply asked for city appropriation directly to cover that, even though it's not a main part of the school board's mission and focus. Really, it's pre-K through 12 education. And therefore, to better clarify and to account for these costs, instead of just asking for the money directly from the city, that we would be in the situation of telling the city, we won't keep the appropriation. However, we will track the costs, which were primarily personnel, custodial and supervisors. There are utility costs involved as well, and some minor materials and supplies. And we will bill you periodically for those actual expenses, rather than just ask for the money up front.
Right. All right. Thanks for that. So the bottom line, the reason for the school board to make these changes is we're trying to introduce a lot of clarity into what we're doing. Every year we look for more ways to be clearer and more transparent. And this one was a desire on our part to really keep track of the money from the city, what was coming in a transfer that was to our operating budget and would be used to educate students, to pay for teachers and to pay for books and other kinds of things, versus what money came from the city as really a fee for service for use of our buildings and for TV. That doesn't really go to educate students. So that's just a kind of a new baseline and a clarification that we've made. So thank you, Craig, for asking that question. Any other comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
So, because this is the last budget item we'll be voting on, I do want to offer one amendment. And that is one that relates to budget language. In terms of guidance, I'd like to ask that we amend this section to include an overall statement that basically gives some guidance to council regarding mitigating impacts to residential tax rates. As you know, both yourself and Board Member Sharp discussed lots of options that were available, and I'd like for us to include language in our budget to that effect, something that would include but not be limited to exploration of reserve fund levels by the city, assessing their growth rate modeling for revenue estimates, and probably most importantly, treatment of surpluses going forward. I'd like to include that in the form of language in the budget. That's my amendment.
All right, but before we, is there a second to that?
Second.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Sharp. Just as by way of reminder, the board last year, when we sent our budget over to the city manager, we included 2 or 3 of these kind of sense of the board recommendations, and so this is just another example. Last year, the ones we included, I can't remember what they were anymore. Share of the revenue, if there was excess revenue for the city, was one of them. And so this is something that we kind of have done in the past and is certainly in order to do. So having said that, are there any questions or discussion about Mr. Rasnick's suggestion here?
Just one question. Since we're doing it on the community services part, how are we going to make clear that it doesn't just apply to that budget? Or does it go along with everything, and it's clear that it's, even though we're passing it now as an amendment to this budget, it's not just for this budget?
So if I could answer that, since it's my amendment. So I'm just including this because it's the last budget item we're voting on tonight, so it's the last opportunity to amend. But my intention is for this to be a budget statement in terms of like guidance to council that when the superintendent presents the budget, that there'll be parts that are included in the discussion of our budget. This is one of them.
So I might make the suggestion that we vote on this, that we separate this from this current motion and this current vote, and that we take it up afterwards. There's no reason why we cannot. So if you would withdraw that motion for now, we'll vote on the community services budget, and then I will recognize you to then do that again.
Madam Chair, I'd like to withdraw my amendment.
All right, thanks so very much. Mr. Kimball.
Adam. Mr. Castillo. Mr. Cheney.
Yes.
Ms. Highland.
Yes.
Ms. Carney.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence. Yes. Mr. Rasnick.
Yes.
Mr. Sharp.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you very much. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Rasnick.
Madam Chair, I'd like to suggest, I'd like to move that the board include in its introductory language of our budget to council language that regarding mitigating impacts to residential property rates, which may include but are not limited to exploration of reserve fund levels, exploration of CIP reserve funds, assessing the growth rate benchmarks that the CFO has developed, and estimates of how City Council is planning to treat surplus revenues in this and future budget cycles.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Rasnick. Is there a second, Mr. Sharp?
Yes. Second.
All right, very good. Are there comments, questions for Mr. Rasnick? Yeah, Mr. Lawrence.
Just a question on how it's been done in the past. If we could avoid the word guidance, something a little gentler, since I don't think that would be taken well. And, you know, obviously they can't tell us how to spend our money, and we can't tell them how to spend theirs, but we are in this together, so we're trying to give suggestions as to ways to make it not simply about the tax rate, because you are going to get people who will automatically say, this is the increase, this is what it translates into, and we need to make sure that people understand we're trying to make it work. We're trying to work with the council, and it's not just about a tax rate.
Right. Right. I agree with you on that one. And were this to pass, I would request that Mr. Rasnick and the superintendent work together to write something that then this board would see before it goes over to city council. Okay, any other questions or comments on this particular thing? All right, seeing none, I'll call the vote. I think we can do a yay or nay on this one. I don't think we need to do a roll call vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? All right, thank you for that, Mr. Rasnick. I appreciate you introducing that. Okay, so we've passed our 3 budget recommendations. The next item on the agenda is Dr. Jones' construction update. And Dr. Jones, I just want to remind you I have only 26 minutes left in my battery.
Okay, I'll be really quick. Just on the construction update, I was watching council meeting, I think it was last week, and some little guys were there wondering if construction is still on time, and it absolutely is. And if you didn't see the website that our students produced, I really encourage you to go out to the TJ Construction site. And actually, it is on the main page of the website, so it's pretty easy to find. They've done some amazing work and have tracked with pictures, and they've actually been meeting with everybody that works with construction to have pictures even of all the equipment and explain what it is. So fabulous work. We've also had our moving meetings over the last 2 weeks, and so our TJ staff, we're supposed to meet tomorrow actually as a whole staff if it doesn't, if snow stays away. I just had an update a minute ago that it's now not supposed to arrive until 7 in the morning, which is kind of a bummer for everybody. But we have also met with our 5th grade team and getting them ready to transition, getting all of the dates on the calendar. So we're working on that right now. And then along with that, we also have been meeting with our pre-K team this last week in preparation to look at moving, if we have to relocate pre-K because we're out of space at Mount Daniel. So that's been, we've been really busy. And along with that, just, there are lots of other elements that will come along with that, that again, when you see transition in the budget that you just passed, when we move, for instance, pre-K, if we have to move them to the trailers at TJ, which the teachers are excited about, because they would actually have 4 rooms for 4 teachers, and they haven't had that before. We are going to have to add a little bit of play equipment because they're tinier than our TJ kiddos. So for construction, everything is on time and doing great.
Great. Do you want to just roll right through to your superintendent's report?
I will. And I know you mentioned the 2 forums. We're very excited about that. We also have a Mount Daniel Kindergarten Night coming up. We're working extremely hard this year to try and get early enrollment for our kindergartners so we can get as accurate of a number as possible. And we'll probably do another enrollment this summer, more than we've done in the past. I do also want to say that we've had so much celebrating around here, and when we talk about the budget, sometimes it's, we don't talk as much about all the great things that go on, but I was present for our state academic team who won state down in Williamsburg, and I actually brought my t-shirt because today I had been working on the budget and I came back and they had left it on my desk, and I just think it's really neat. The front is the Scholastic Bowl, then on the back it's the Virginia State Champs. And I think what's really cool is it's 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. So really, really, really proud of that whole group. We're also traveling to basketball state this week, and I will be in Richmond, as I know Mr. Cheney will be as well, and cheering the girls on. So we're really excited about that. And I thought it was a great week with just that, but also went to the Honk musical. If you had a chance to go to that, and I'm going to say, because it's a budget-driven thing, if you were not happy with the microphones, I thought that was an example of when we talk about technology and investment, that's a piece that needs to be fixed. And that will not happen again if we have to go out and rent mics, because those kids are so talented, so talented. So what a brilliant job they did. I also just want to point out that TJ and MEH both had Odyssey of the Mind teams at regionals. They both qualified for state in April. Our middle school sent kids to the National History Competition. And again, we had the most first places of any other middle school that was in attendance. Also, we went to the Regional Science Fair, and just to point out our success, and that was held in Arlington, we had 4 first places in physics, chemistry, medicine, and botany. We had 2 seconds in engineering. We had 3 third places and in chemical engineering and medicine again. So we're just celebrating everywhere, and congratulations to our teachers and our staff. And then just last of all, I do want to say, I think you know how difficult the budget is for us, because we start by meeting with every principal and every director in the division, and it's an agonizing couple of days because you really just want to say yes, 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 yes. And so we want to say thank you to the school board, because we know that sometimes we forget that this is not your job. You actually have real jobs in the real world. And I know it takes a tremendous, tremendous amount of time. And our chair emails, and I email her sometimes at weird hours, and she always answers, and so appreciative. And then the staff, we have some key staff that are sitting out here tonight. I just want to say thank you, because they put in a phenomenal amount of hours. Both of our assistant superintendents have been in on this budget process from day one, Lisa Hyatt and, of course, Mr. Kimball with finance. And Mr. Brett, what an awesome job he has done on our media this year, and just helping us. And I was really impressed. I know Amanda Blanchard, one of our lead teachers, is out here talking about how much our teachers have been able to learn about our own budget this year by the messaging that we've been able to do. And so thank you, Mr. Brett, for that. And then also Marty Goodell, I have to say thank you to her, because if we have a last-minute packet to put together, she's the right arm there. So thank you for that. And again, thank you for all the support getting the budget to this point, because I know it's been a very, very trying year just trying to figure out what we can ask for. So thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Mr. Cheney, I'm going to start down on that end with board comments if you have any. All right, thank you, Mr. Rasnick. Do you have anything left?
Yes. So, I alluded this earlier tonight, and I don't know how many times I've said this, and I think we're now at the time where someone has to do something about this, and that's this issue of tax elasticity. Mr. Castillo shared some facts tonight in terms of demographics in the region and where we are. And I will tell you that this is becoming an extremely important issue for decision makers. And the idea that there is such a wide divergence of opinion on where we are as a community doesn't make a lot of sense, because there is this vacuum in what is the real story that just needs to be filled. I noticed, and I really appreciate the city CFO is here tonight. He's done a great job in difficult circumstances. I'd encourage him to look into this issue. But I think that as a community, we really kind of need to know, what is it that we can afford? And so I'm actually going to call out the press tonight. For such a small community, it seems like we might have as many press vehicles and bloggers as we do citizens, but specifically the Falls Church News Press, the Falls Church Times, and now the new Falls Church Post. I follow all three often. I think they all do a great service to this community in terms of the things that they cover and look at. So I'm calling them out tonight. And asking them, begging them, pleading with them to play referee in this regard. Decision makers in this city need to have some idea what the tax elasticity is. What can we afford? Because it's really becoming almost irresponsible now for us to not have some answers in this regard. There's way too much anecdotal discussion about either how much we're undertaxed or overtaxed, and not enough evidence as to what is reasonable or not. So I would just ask, if we're not going to do it ourselves and invest some money or something into a study, that the press, who seems to be eager to delve into these things, delve into something that really would, I think, be very helpful, especially for the City Council going forward as they look at the budget overall. That's all. Thank you so much to everyone tonight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rasnick. Ms. Hyland?
Just a reminder that tomorrow night, weather permitting, is the international dinner at George Mason, and that starts at 6:30 in the Mustang Cafe. Also, weather permitting, spring sports are supposed to start this week at George Mason, so we'll see how that goes. And I just, the Odyssey of the Mind and the National History Day, those two competitions, I've had children compete in both of them previously, over many years ago, in the Odyssey of the Mind. And I was just really pleased to read about our successes this weekend. and I ran into a parent who coached my oldest daughter's Odyssey of the Mind team when she was, I think, in 6th grade. Now she's going to be 20, and she was a judge at Odyssey of Mind this weekend, because it really, people become so invested in that program. It's really a great way to teach children how, critical thinking and problem solving, and so I was really pleased to hear about that, so that was great news. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much, Ms. Hyland. Mr. Lawrence, anything to share?
Just two things. My son did take part in Odyssey of the Mind, and God, the people who are judges, I mean, they're there from basically 7 in the morning till 6 at night,
Yeah.
and, the parents and the teams, you're there, you do 2 competitions, and you can leave, and then you hear about it from the judges afterwards when they get home and remind you that you recruited them.
Right.
I've just got 2 things
Been
that I've talked with most people on the board about, and I was going to hold off until budget was done, because now that budget's done, as I understand the process, we'll simply send it to council, they'll fund it, and it's over. So, but for the future, I want to talk about 2 things. One is setting a technology policy, getting back to the problems that we had a couple months ago. In talking to people, it seems like there are 2 sorts of technology people in the schools. The ones who use it in the classroom, and then the one who take care of it separate from the classrooms, who do the upgrades and things like that. And it seems like, there wasn't a whole lot of communication. So I'd like to get us talking about, should we set a policy or guidelines to say for certain kinds of installations or upgrades or updates, they shouldn't get done within a certain amount of time before key events like huge finals or end of semester or something like that, to try to prevent a repeat of what happened last time. So I just want to set that out as something I'd like to talk about. And then secondly, could we talk about getting some training on board docs? Because I'll be blunt. I really, right now, just hate it. It's a posting site, and I've looked at the board docs, commercial information, and it seems like it can do so much. And, if somebody can point me to something online, but I at least really need training, because to me, it's really frustrating. It's nothing more than a posting system, and there's got to be more to it. So, that's it.
That's our own little secret initiation ritual, right? It's our own little way to haze
I know where
people,
you live.
not teaching them how to use board docs. But I'm certain that Marty Goodell can help get you the training that you need for board docs. And the other topic, superintendent's written down. All right, Kieran.
I want to thank Mr. Rasnick again for calling upon the press to help us with the matters that we've been concerned with on estimating city capacity. And I'll just ask Falls Church Patch to also join with that endeavor. I was pleased to attend the fundraiser this past Saturday evening for the Falls Church Winter Emergency Shelter, and it was an outstanding success. Just the room was packed, people were having fun, and most of all, money was flowing
Good.
toward the continuation of this service that, as I recall, began in 1997 and it continues today to provide for an overflow when there's so many people homeless that are just not able to be served by Bailey's Crossroads Shelter or by those religious congregations that on a rotating basis provide for emergency shelter in the winter for the homeless. We have a shelter here in Falls Church that provides that, and I know our students too have participated in service to the folks who are helped by that agency. I will also want to acknowledge a couple of, well, that was, okay, there was a really wonderful forum that was put on by CBC, and CBC has been joined by the Democratic Committee and by the Republican Committee to help the community to understand the stormwater issues that are now confronting us in the form of a need to provide for rather large funding on an annual basis for the foreseeable future and I think they provided a really expert panel to help people understand it, and there were great questions from the audience held at the Legion Hall on Oak Street. And lastly, I attended the Creative Calendar second committee meeting this past week, and I think that group is off to a very, very good start, and we tried to set out some of the objectives that people would like to see, and I think we came to a good consensus, at least on beginning objectives, and I know we'll have another meeting in just another couple of weeks. So anybody has questions on that process, please get back to me. I'd be happy to talk with you about it. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Mr. Castillo?
Nothing here, please.
All right, very good. I have just a few things that I've jotted down. First, this school board does do things that are not just the budget, and we're very pleased that some of those are going to be coming soon. One thing I want the community to know is that soon after the budget is complete, the board will begin, along with staff and staff leadership, a community-wide vision and strategy process. It's been a long time since we created the strategic plan for the schools, and I think it's entirely appropriate at this juncture for us to work with the community to envision what our schools should be like in the future and how we get there. This is not going to be a year-long process, but rather something that is very inclusive and moves along very quickly and results in a vision, mission, values, and a handful of key strategies to get there. And so stay tuned. We're excited about it. We think it's going to be a great opportunity for the community and for the school division to really benefit from all the smarts we have of people living here. We expect staff will be engaged. We expect that, and that's on both sides, on the school side and on the city side. We expect the Planning Commission and City Council to be engaged. We expect businesses to be engaged, students to be engaged. You know, we want everybody to help us figure out about our schools. The second thing I have to say is I'm so excited to hear you talking about the science fair. Back in the day when kids in the middle school were babysitting my kids, the science fair was required of every child. And every babysitter I ever had in my house complained about it until they'd done it, and then they said it was the most amazing thing that they did to learn that. And it went away for a while. And I remember when my first campaign, there were some folks in the city that said, boy, Susan, where did that go and why can't we bring it back? And so I'm just really pleased, both that we're doing it again and that our kids are having such great success. I also, just because I love Odyssey of the Mind, my daughter did it for years and I coached for a couple of years. I just have a kind of a story about Odyssey of the Mind. When my daughter was competing in it, I mentioned to my aunt, who was the chairman of the physics department at a high school in Florida, and was very familiar with Odyssey of the Mind, that Caitlin was doing that program. And she was so impressed. She said, wow, how did Caitlin get selected to do that? That's really an honor. Because at the schools in Florida, only one team could participate in Odyssey of the Mind. And so it was always the same super smart kids that got to do Odyssey of the Mind that got selected. And when I told her that that's not how we did it in Falls Church, that in Falls Church any child can be an Odyssey of the Mind, that they just pull together a team and get a coach and they go and get after it and do it, she was just amazed and just thought that was the greatest thing she'd ever heard of. And this is just kind of one of my Falls Church stories, right? I mean, this is what we try to do for our kids. And sometimes I think we don't realize how different the way we do it is from other places. So that's my little Odyssey of the Mind story. The last thing I want to say is that last night, Dr. Jones and I had the opportunity to attend the board meeting of the Falls Church Education Foundation. We do that on a monthly basis. But our job last night was to attend the meeting and to really give a pep talk to that board and to help them catch the fire about our vision for the schools in the city and how the foundation could help with that. And so we had a great time doing that and talking to them. At the end, we had a few really exciting ideas about ways to work together with the foundation in the area of technology and creating in our schools the best kind of lab for the most effective use of technology for student performance in the country and how they could help us with that. We had some ideas about them helping us, transition into our new buildings as we move into them over the next few years. and some ideas about facilities as well. And so what we've done is we've asked Tony and Deb Hiscott to work together and pull together some plans. And so this board will be getting the results of their brainstorming and ideas here quite soon. But I hope that this kind of signals an opportunity for us to kind of put in turbo drive the way we work with that foundation and the way that they're able to assist us in our schools, because they're quite committed and very excited to do that. So that was just a lot of fun to meet with them last night. And with that, I'm done with my board comments, and I think the last thing we have is approval of several sets of minutes.
Okay, not tonight.
No. Minutes of January 22. Oh. I think my computer just died.
I move that the board approve the minutes from the meeting on January 22nd, 2013.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any an abstention? Thank you for Mr. Cheney.
And now I move that the board approve the minutes of the meeting on January 29th, 2013.
Is there a second? Second. All right, thank you very much. And all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Aye.
Abstain.
Thank you. And
Lastly, I move that the board approve the minutes of the meeting on February 9th, 2013.
Second.
thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And are there any opposed or abstentions? All right. Very good. Is there anything else? There are a couple of things for board review online and enrollment, and please tell me it doesn't say that more kids have shown up since the last time. Just a few? Okay. Conference report from the General Assembly and student report. And so the board would look at those. They're also posted on board docs broadly for the community. Yes, Mr. Lawrence.
Going forward, can we have our student rep make comments during board comments?
Yes, we absolutely will. We'll do that. This is kind of a special meeting that we're doing for the budget. We'll have our regular meeting next Tuesday, and I hope you'll be able to be here in time for a work session if that fits into your schedule, and certainly be available for board comments. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. You guys also should remind me as we go through the discussion, or you should raise your hand, Maeve, if you have something to say anytime we're up here on the dais, right? You can chime in. Anything else? All right, nothing else being here, we will adjourn for this evening. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I appreciate it.
We're going to do close.